Greetings. My name is Stephanie Swanson, and I am the pastor of Crossroads Church. This project came together while reflecting upon Dr. Martin Luther King's words in Letter from a Birmingham Jail. Dr. King's message is one that is still very applicable today. To hear his words of disappointment in the white moderate and the church, spoken by some of our own white members, offers us an opportunity to claim the ways in which we have failed, to repent, and to do better. As we collaborated on this project, a wise voice inquired about the absence of Black female voices from the civil rights movement. Dr. King was afforded a platform to drive a movement, but we must not forget the courageous voices of so many Black and brown women that were the backbone of the movement. I offer my thanks to this wise voice that challenged us to do better. In this video, you will hear excerpts from Dr. King's Letter from a Birmingham Jail, interspersed with inspiring, challenging, and convicting quotes by Black and brown female leaders of the civil rights movement. Because these women may not be as familiar to you, we have highlighted their quotes and hope that their words will sink deep within your soul and press you to not sit back and remain silent, but to take action and be an advocate for a more just and equitable community today. A beloved community.
We shall overcome. We shall
The cage bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. Maya Angelou.
16th of April, 1963. My dear fellow clergymen, while confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Nobody's free until everybody is free. Fannie Lou Hamer. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Ella Baker.
You deplored the demonstrations taking place in Birmingham, but your statement, I am sorry to say, fails to express a similar concern about the condition that brought about the demonstrations. I am sure that none of you would want to rest content with the superficial kind of social analysis that deals merely with the effect and does not grapple with the underlying cause. Even if segregation is gone, we will still need to be free. We will still have to see that everyone has a job, even if we can all vote. But if people are still hungry, we will not be free. Ella Baker.
One of the basic points in your statement is that the action that I and my associates have taken in Birmingham is untimely. Lamentably, it is an historical fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges voluntarily. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have yet to engage in a direct action campaign that was well timed. In the view of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation, for years now I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied. Struggle is never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. Coretta Scott King.
We have waited for more than 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. Perhaps it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your black brothers and sisters, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that's just been advertised on television, and see the ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky, and see her beginning to distort her personality by developing an unconscious bitterness toward white people. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro, living constantly at the tippy-toe stance, never quite knowing what to expect next, and are plagued with inner fears and outer resentments. When you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over, and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. I hope, sirs, that you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience. People always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired, but that isn't true. I wasn't tired physically, or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old, although some people have an image of me as being old then. I was 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in. Rosa Parks. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. Fannie Lou Hamer.
I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection.
Freedom and justice cannot be parceled out in pieces to suit political convenience. I don't believe you can stand for freedom for one group of people and deny it to others. Coretta Scott King.
I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that law and order exist for the purpose of establishing justice, and that when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that the present tension in the South is a necessary phase of the transition from an obnoxious negative peace in which the Negro passively accepts the unjust plight to a substantive and positive peace in which all men will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. Actually, we who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. We bring it out in the open where it can be seen and dealt with. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Maya Angelou.
I had also hoped that the white moderate would reject the myth concerning time in relation to the struggle for freedom. Such an attitude stems from a tragic misconception of time, from the strangely irrational notion that there is something in the very flow of time that will inevitably cure all ills. Actually, time itself is neutral. It can be used either destructively or constructively. More and more, I feel that the people of ill will have used time much more effectively than have the people of goodwill. We will have to repent in this generation not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to be co-workers with God, and without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation. We must use time creatively, in the knowledge that the time is always ripe to do right. It doesn't matter how strong your opinions are. If you don't use your power for positive change, you are indeed part of the problem. Coretta Scott King.
Oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever. The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself, and that is what has happened to the American Negro. The Negro has many pent-up resentments and latent frustrations, and he must release them. So let him march. Let him make prayer pilgrimages to the city hall. Let him go on freedom rides and try to understand why he must do so. If you're not angry, you're either a stone or you're too sick to be angry. You should be angry. You must not be bitter. Bitterness is a cancer. It leads upon the host. It doesn't do anything to the object of its displeasure. So use that anger. Yes, you write it, you paint it, you dance it, you march it, you vote it, you do everything about it. You talk it, never stop talking it. Maya Angelou.
So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? I have learned over the years that when one's mind is made up, this diminishes fear. Knowing what must be done does away with fear. Rosa Parks.
I had hoped that the white moderate would see this need. Perhaps I was too optimistic. Perhaps I expected too much. I suppose I should have realized that the few members of the oppressor race can understand the deep groans and passionate yearnings of the oppressed race, and still fewer have the vision to see that injustice must be rooted out by strong, persistent, and determined action. The greatest evil in our country today is ignorance. We need to be taught to study rather than to believe. Septima Poinsett Clark. Activism is my rent for living on the planet. Alice Walker.
I have been so greatly disappointed with the white church and its leadership. Of course, there are some notable exceptions, but despite these notable exceptions, I must honestly reiterate that I have been disappointed with the church. When I was suddenly catapulted into the leadership of the bus protest in Montgomery, Alabama a few years ago, I felt we would be supported by the white church. I felt that the white ministers, priests, and rabbis of the South would be among our strongest allies. Instead, some have been outright opponents, refusing to understand the freedom movement and misrepresenting its leaders. All too many others have been more cautious than courageous and have remained silent behind the anesthetizing security of stained glass windows.
Sometimes it seems like to tell the truth today is to run the risk of being killed. But if I fall, I'll fall 5 feet 4 inches forward in the fight for freedom. I'm not backing off. Fannie Lou Hamer.
In deep disappointment, I have wept over the laxity of the church. but be assured that my tears have been tears of love. There can be no deep disappointment where there is not deep love. Yes, I love the church, but oh, how we have blemished and scarred that body through social neglect and through fear of being nonconformists. The man who never makes a mistake always takes orders from one who does. No man or woman who tries to pursue an ideal in his or her own way is without enemies. Daisy Bates.
There was a time when the church was powerful, and the time when the early Christians rejoiced at being deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed. In those days, the church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinion. It was a thermostat to transform the mores of society. To bring about change, you must not be afraid to take the first step. We will fail when we fail to try. Rosa Parks.
Things are different now. So often the contemporary church is a weak, ineffectual voice with an uncertain sound. So often is it an arch defender of the status quo. Far from being disrupted by the presence of the church, the power structure of an average community is consulted by church's silence, and often even vocal, sanction of things as they are. But the judgment of God is upon the church as never before. If today's church does not recapture the sacrificial spirits of the early church, it will lose its authenticity, therefore the loyalty of millions, and be dismissed as an irrelevant social club with no meaning for the 20th century. Every day I meet young people whose disappointment with the church has turned into outright disgust. The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassion actions of its members. Coretta Scott King.
Perhaps I have once again been too optimistic. Is organized religion too inextricably bound to the status quo to save our nation and the world? Perhaps I must turn my faith to the inner spiritual church, the church within the church, as the true ecclesia and the hope of the world. But again, I am thankful to God that some noble souls from the ranks of organized religion have broken loose from the paralyzing chains of conformity and joined us as active partners in the struggle for freedom. I hope the church as a whole will meet the challenge of this decisive hour. But even if the church does not come to the aid of justice, I have no despair about the future.
You can pray until you faint, but unless you get up and try to do something, God is not going to put it in your lap. Fannie Lou Hamer.
Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with America's destiny. Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the pen of Jefferson etched the majestic words of the Declaration of Independence across the pages of history, we were here. For more than 2 centuries, our forebears labored in this country without wages. They made cotton king. They built the homes of their masters while suffering gross injustice and shameful humiliation. And yet out of a bottomless vitality, they continued to thrive and develop. If the inexpressible cruelties of slavery could not stop us, the opposition we now face will surely fail. We will win our freedom because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of God are embodied in our echoing demands. The struggle is eternal. The tribe increases. Somebody else carries on. Ella Baker.
Before closing, I feel impelled to mention one other point of your statement that has troubled me profoundly. You warmly commended the Birmingham police force for keeping order and preventing violence. I doubt that you would have so warmly commended the police force if you had seen its dogs sinking their teeth into unarmed, nonviolent Negroes. I doubt that you would so quickly commend the policemen if you were to observe their ugly and inhumane treatment of Negroes here in the city jail. If you were to watch them push and curse old Negro women and young Negro girls, if you were to see them slap and kick old Negro men and young boys. If you were to observe them as they did on 2 occasions, refuse to give us food because we wanted to sing our grace together. It is true that the police have exercised a degree of discipline in handling the demonstrators. In this sense, they have conducted themselves nonviolently in public. But for what purpose? To preserve the civil system of segregation? Over the past few years, I have consistently preached that nonviolent demands that the means we must use be as pure as the ends we seek. I have tried to make clear that this is wrong to use immoral means to attain moral ends. But now I must affirm that this is as wrong, or perhaps even more so, to use moral means to preserve immoral ends. Until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons, becomes as important to the rest of the country as the killing of white mothers' sons, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until this happens. Ella Baker.
I wish you had commended the Negro sit-inners and demonstrators of Birmingham for their sublime courage, their willingness to suffer, and their amazing discipline in the midst of great provocation. One day the South will recognize its real heroes. They will be the James Merediths with a noble sense of purpose that enables them to face jeering and hostile mobs, and with the agonizing loneliness that characterizes the life of the pioneer. They will be old, oppressed, battered Negro women, symbolized in a 72-year-old woman in Montgomery, Alabama, who rose up with a sense of dignity and with her people decided not to ride segregated buses, and who responded with ungrammatical profundity to one who inquired about her weariness. My feet is tired, but my soul is at rest. They will be the young high school and college students, the young ministers of the gospel, and a host of other elders, courageously and nonviolently sitting at lunch counters and willingly going to jail for conscience' sake. One day, the South will know that when these disinherited children of God sat down at lunch counters, they were in reality standing up for what is best in the American dream and for the most sacred values in our Judeo-Christian heritage, thereby bringing our nation back to those great wells of democracy, which were dug deep by the Founding Fathers in their formulation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. We will not stop. There is only one outcome. Diane Nash.
Let us all hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities, and in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty. Yours for the cause of peace and brotherhood, Martin Luther King, Jr.
You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I rise. Maya Angelou.
We shall